Hello, and welcome once again to the Chris Ott channel. This is Chris Ott, and I'm going to be covering part 7 of this series on causation. Now, in my last talk, I talked about what's called the external world, which is a theoretical, unseen, inconceivable second world that causes the world of our experience somehow. And this has always been in philosophy in different forms and in different names, but we've always had it since Plato and Aristotle. Now, I want to go over what this was a residue of from the past. Why did this? Why do we have this in philosophy, and why have we always had it? This idea of this causal world to explain our experiential world, the one we actually enjoy and suffer, and etc. I thought I would explain this by giving a example of the approach that historically was how philosophers and scientists approached the problem of what causes something. So how did something get there? How does something change? So I thought I would just briefly, and I would show this in an example. The idea was, throughout history, since the beginning of thoughts on causation, to hypothesize some unseen responsible thing. And that would explain it. And I have explained that this is only a nominal cause, meaning it's cause in name only, because there's no mechanism given for how it causes what it is said to cause. So let me give you an example. Not too long ago in history, when philosophers tried to consider how to treat disease, they hypothesized that there were unseen, invisible humors in the blood, and certain ones caused disease. And so an approach to a sick person was to bleed them to try to get some of those out of their body with the blood. And people used to die from this bleeding. But that's a good example of an unseen, responsible, theoretical thing. But no mechanics are given or mechanism for how it causes the disease. It just does. It's the name of the cause, and it's unseen, so we can't really test it. It's armchair philosophy, okay? But in the Enlightenment and into the modern age, especially the 19th and 20th centuries, science began to progress because of a new approach to considering what causes things. And that new approach was to look for processes that are causing something. So today, when we try to understand disease, we try to look for atomic processes and cellular processes and processes of the organs and the blood and the nerves and how they work and what's happening. We don't just give a nominal cause, some theoretical responsible thing. Instead, we look for evidence of processes going on, and we try to find the actual mechanism that's causing the disease. Okay? Well, because of, I said last time, because of an unfortunate sequence of events, the order of the events, philosophy was kind of caught in the past, and with still holding on to its belief in this unseen theoretical cause, this external world. And the reason is because in the 1700s, there were attempts to do away with it. Most importantly, George Berkeley tried to do away with it, and I discussed that. But all these attempts to do away with a responsible causal external world that we can't see, causing the experiential one we do, they all ended up implying that the world was in our head, which is called solipsism, where the world's in your head, and everybody's world is just in their head. Or in their mind, or in their brain. And so there was no way to explain why we experience the same world. Okay? Because it was assumed that experience is occurring, either in our brain or in our body somehow. Okay? And so, if our experience is there, then that means the world of our experience is just personal. I hope I made that clear. So, in order to avoid that, it was kind of decided in philosophy around the turn of the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, that they would never do that again. They were going to stick with the external world cause, the responsible, the theoretical, whatever it is, okay? Because to avoid this solipsism problem. And anybody who didn't go along with the program was deemed kind of crazy or irrational or sort of a nutter. And so it became associated with common sense that there's this theoretical invisible, causal, responsible something or other. This other world that we have no evidence for. And by calling it common sense, it's literally called common sense metaphysics today, it basically made a nutter out of anybody who saw anything else. Okay? So it became a kind of a litmus test for your sanity and your seriousness. It's just really tragic, because while the sciences were progressing forward, because they had moved away from such invisible theoretical things toward looking for mechanisms, processes, science was still stuck using medieval thinking, ancient thinking. Do you see? It had now made a bulwark around this archaic idea that it was using. And so we find that in philosophy, it reached by 100, 200 years ago, reached a dead end in what's called the mind-body problem, which they can't resolve. And that's the question of, how do we have our experience? Well, you can't answer it so long as you have an invisible theoretical something or other called an external world, and you can't even talk about it because you've never experienced it. You can't possibly, obviously, determine how it causes your experience, because it's entirely just a theory. It's not even really a theory, because it's not even something you can conceive. It's just a word, or two words, external world. What's it external to? It's just what they call it. It means it's outside of your experience. External to your experience. So I hope I made that more clear. Now today what I'm going to talk about is very hard to describe, but it's very important. Toward the end of the Enlightenment, there was one attempt to try and develop some kind of mechanism for how we perceive, okay? More than just naming some cause that you can't see, giving a name, like the humors that they're bleeding out of your body, see? Instead of just giving a name to it, it being a nominal cause, there actually was some attempt to conceive of some kind of psychological process that is producing our experiential world. And the beginning of that belongs to Immanuel Kant. And I'm going to explain what he thought. And I'm going to show why it's very different from anything prior to him.